Hey friends, tonight we drift way, way back to where it all began. The air is thick with the scent of clay and warm river water, and overhead, the stars are spilling across the sky like someone knocked over a bowl of sugar. You're barefoot, standing on soft earth that squishes slightly under your heels. In the distance, two mighty rivers wind their way across the land like silver threads. This is Mesopotamia. No alerts, no pop-ups, no interruptions. Just you, the quiet hum of your fan, and a long, gentle journey through the world's first civilization. This video is ad-free so nothing's going to jar you awake just as you're settling into the story. Now, dim the lights. Maybe pull the blanket up a little higher, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along the marshy edge of the Euphrates River, your feet sinking into the same black soil that ancient farmers once worshipped. It's warm, slightly sticky, and buzzing with insects. Not the ideal vacation spot, but thousands of years ago, this was the closest thing to paradise. Between these rivers, people stopped roaming and started planting. And just like that, history began. You step into a settlement, though settlement might be too small a word. It's sprawling. Narrow alleys twist between clusters of mud brick homes, each one low-slung and flat-roofed, with goats napping on top like they own the place. The air smells like firewood, sweat, and simmering lentils. You're in Uruk now, arguably the first real city the world ever saw. And it's alive. Children dart between reed fences with handmade toys. Merchants shout prices from behind carts stacked with barley, dates, and salted fish. Somewhere nearby, a musician plucks at a lyre. And towering above it all, half swallowed by heat haze, stands something massive as ziggurat, a giant step pyramid made of sun-dried bricks stretching toward the gods. You crane your neck, shielding your eyes. The thing is ridiculous. Do the gods really need that many stairs? Or are the priests just flexing their civic budget? Either way, it's impressive. And it's just one piece of this strange, magnificent puzzle. These people engineered canals that sliced through the land, built granaries bigger than most modern houses, and somehow managed to invent writing. Not for poetry or love letters, mind you. The earliest known writing was about barley. Specifically, who owed whom how much. Inside a dim little workshop, a scribe crouches over a clay tablet, pressing wedge-shaped symbols with a sharpened reed. Cuneiform, they'll call it one day. You peer over his shoulder and realize it's basically an invoice. Historians still argue whether writing emerged for record-keeping or storytelling, but either way, it was practical. The world's first accountants had officially clocked in. Outside, life hums. Farmers pass by, leading donkeys burdened with reed baskets. Women scoop water from a well while chatting and swatting flies. The smell of something frying probably onions and lentils wafts in from a nearby hearth. You pause under the shade of a date palm and try to wrap your head around it. This was all built from scratch, with no blueprints, no power tools, just mud, fire, and a whole lot of determination. And speaking of fire, don't get too close to the kilns. Those things are blazing. It's where they bake bricks, fire pottery, and occasionally burn their fingertips when someone forgets to use tongs. You pass one kiln where a young apprentice is trying to rescue a bowl that collapsed mid-firing. He mutters something under his breath that probably translates to, "Why did I choose this career?" Still, the progress is undeniable. These people didn't just survive, they experimented. They created systems, hierarchies, rituals, taxes, you know, all the things that make modern life feel, well, complicated. Religion is everywhere. There's a God for every force of nature and every neighborhood. One moment, you're thanking Inanna for fertility. The next, you're offering a pigeon to appease the spirit of your back gate. And don't even think about skipping a festival. Those gods keep score. And yet, despite the heat, the floods, the endless supply of bugs, they built and dreamed and drank. Oh yes, they brewed beer here long before anyone thought to carbonate it. It's thick, warm, and full of chunks. You're handed a straw to sip it because chewing your beverage is apparently a thing now. As night creeps in, the rooftops glow under the pale moon. You climb up one and stretch out on the clay tiles, arms behind your head. Somewhere nearby, a group is singing, or maybe arguing. It's hard to tell. A dog barks, a baby cries, the city breathes, and you lie there, staring at a sky that hasn't changed in 5,000 years, wondering what it felt like to be the first human who looked at a piece of land and said, "I think you'll build a home here." You don't have the answers, but tonight, you've stepped closer than most. You wake to the sound of a rooster yelling at the sunrise like it's got a personal grudge. It's not elegant or even rhythmic, more like a toddler blowing into a broken trumpet. But here, in ancient Uruk, that's your alarm clock. There are no snooze buttons. The city is waking up, and so are you. From your rooftop bed, you see smoke beginning to curl from clay ovens, the scent of flatbread and wood ash drifting up to greet the dawn. Below you, the streets are already busy vendors dragging carts, donkeys braying like they haven't had their morning coffee, and neighbors loudly arguing over who borrowed whose basket. Just another day in Sumer. You climb down a rough wooden ladder, your feet landing in a narrow alley that winds between high mud brick walls. The stones are still cool from the night, but the heat is already sneaking in, slow and steady. You wipe your eyes and try to process it all. This city, this culture, these people, the Sumerians. These folks weren't just early adopters, they were original inventors. Not in a garage startup way, more like, let's invent civilization from scratch using mud and stubbornness way. Writing, laws, the wheel, irrigation, taxes, schools, beer, you name it. They had a prototype. Historians still debate whether Sumerians truly invented the wheel or merely refined it. But either way, they made it roll. You walk past a group of scribes sitting in the shade, clay tablets spread before them like spreadsheets from the underworld. They're carving cuneiform with sharpened reeds, recording deliveries, land deeds, and temple donations. Some of the characters look identical to you, but one slip of the stylus could turn grain into goat, and that has real consequences. You'd be amazed how many arguments started with an accidental livestock typo. Scribes held serious power here. To be literate was to be elite. Not only could you read the law, you could write it. That's a rare kind of clout in a world where most people's jobs involve dirt and sweat. You peek over a boy's shoulder in a tablet school as he copies out a punishment exercise for the 5th time. Something about, "I will not insult the priest's beard." You decide not to ask what happened. And then there's math. But not your kind. The Sumerians counted in base 60 sexagesimal, as it's officially called. That's why we have 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and 360 degrees in a circle. And yes, they figured this out 5,000 years ago, using nothing but their brains and some pointy sticks. Historians still argue whether this system emerged from trade practices or astronomical observations, but either way, it stuck. Try explaining that to your geometry teacher. You turn a corner and nearly run into a ceremonial procession. Priests in gleaming white linen, their heads shaved, carry offerings to the temple of Inanna, baskets of dates, smoked fish, even a freshly plucked pigeonole for the goddess of love, war, and chaotic energy. She doesn't do subtle. Her temple dominates the city center, a complex of courtyards, storerooms, and the towering ziggurat still under construction, judging by the groaning oxen dragging loads of bricks uphill. These temples weren't just places of worship. They were banks, warehouses, record offices, schools, and occasionally the local brewery. Religion and bureaucracy walked hand in hand here, like an ancient power couple. You follow the procession for a while, curious. Inside the temple courtyard, acolytes chant, incense burns, and somewhere nearby, a goat looks extremely concerned about its future. Offerings to the gods were a daily ritual, and failure to deliver literally could bring misfortune. Or at least, a very stern lecture from a priest who hadn't had lunch yet. And this isn't just tradition, it's policy. The temple owns land, collects taxes, and employs hundreds. If you're lucky, you might work there. If not, you're probably hauling water or sweeping animal droppings from the main road. Either way, the gods get their cut. You duck into a market square where stalls overflow with baskets of onions, figs, and barley. A boy offers you a clay cup of barley birits, warm, thick, and has the texture of something you should chew. You sip politely and nod, though you secretly wish for something carbonated. A group of women in brightly patterned robes walks by, carrying bolts of cloth. Some head for the weaving quarters, others toward the river. In Sumer, women could own property, run businesses, and even become priestesses. They weren't exactly equal, but they weren't invisible either. One woman, you overhear, just bought a house across the alley from her ex-husband either, for convenience or vengeance. Hard to say. A local potter waves you into his workshop. He proudly shows off his kiln and early innovation of fired clay technology. He's producing dozens of identical bowls using a simple turntable. You realize this is one of the earliest examples of mass production. Not bad for a guy with no electricity and a donkey for an assistant. Outside, a scribe argues with a farmer about a land deed. The farmer claims his neighbor moved a boundary stone during the last flood. The scribe, without looking up, says he'll check the tablet records. There are no lawyers here, just paperwork, memory, and whoever speaks the loudest. As you walk on, you pass a man sculpting a tiny clay figure, broad hips, wide eyes, hands over its chest. It's not art, exactly. It's an amulet, or a fertility charm, or maybe just a good luck figure to keep rats out of the grain storage. No one's entirely sure. Scholars still debate the purpose of these so-called Venus figurines, but they show up in every household and shop like ancient bobbleheads. Back on the main road, carts rumble past, loaded with fish from the marshes and wool from distant herds. The roads are dusty but alive. Trade flows like blood through this city, metals from Anatolia, timber from the Levant, lapis lazuli from distant Afghanistan. You think again how strange it is that a civilization with no steel, no engines, and no money, as we know, it could create something this connected. As the sky turns golden and the smell of stew begins to float through the alleyways, you climb back onto your rooftop perch. Below, the city buzzes. You can see torches flickering to life. The ziggurat looms in silhouette, like a stairway to the stars. Somewhere, a flute begins to play. You close your eyes, the warm breeze brushing your face. The Sumerians are still down there bargaining, building, blessing, and baking. They aren't just a chapter in a textbook. They're right beneath your skin. Their systems echo in your calendar. Their measurements hide in your clocks. Their symbols sit at the root of every contract, ledger, and line of code. And you're only on day 2. The third morning begins not with sunlight, but with noise, loud, chaotic, very dusty noise. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor is chasing his donkey through a courtyard, yelling words that sound surprisingly universal in tone, if not in language. Chickens scatter, children laugh, and you, groggy and stiff from your rooftop sleep, blink into the rising Mesopotamian haze. There's no sleeping in when you live in a city that never really quiets down. In Uruk, dawn doesn't gently roll in, it punches the air like a drumline made of carts, hooves, and early morning market chatter. And today, you're going somewhere special, somewhere sacred, bustling, and just a bit absurd, the world of the gods. You head toward the heart of the city, past mud brick homes and reed fences, toward a complex of courtyards and high walls. This is the Iana district, the ceremonial and administrative center of Uruk. And right in the middle of it, surrounded by all the noise of priests, scribes, and servants, sits the temple of Inanna, the goddess of love, war, fertility, and because she's clearly an overachiever, also storms and political power. Worshipping her isn't a passive affair. Offerings are made, songs are sung, statues are bathed, and rituals are carried out with such theatrical flair you'd think you wandered onto a sacred stage play. You stop just outside the temple gates as a procession winds its way through the plaza, musicians with harps and drums, dancers with painted faces, and priests bearing baskets of dates and polished obsidian. It's loud, it's smoky, and oddly mesmerizing. Inside, the temple walls are plastered white and inscribed with hymns and symbols. Incense coils upward in thick spirals. Priests in linen robes move like clockwork, their bare feet padding softly over the cool stone floors. You watch them place offerings before a large, wide-eyed statue of Inanna. Her eyes are carved from shell and lapis lazuli, giving her a gaze that is both serene and ever so slightly judgmental. But here's the thing. Temples in Mesopotamia weren't just religious centers. They were economic powerhouses. You step through a rear passage and find yourself in a storeroom where clay jars are stacked in neat rows, each labeled with a stylus mark pressed into soft mud. Dates, oil, grain, it's a full-blown inventory system. The temple doesn't just receive offerings. It processes them, stores them, redistributes them. It's an ancient warehouse crossed with a tax office, run entirely by the gods' bureaucrats. You overhear 2 priests debating whether a shipment of grain was properly measured. One insists his numbers are right. The other accuses him of using a bent reed as a measuring rod. A third priest rolls his eyes and starts checking the inventory tablet. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian priests were primarily religious leaders or glorified accountants, but it's clear they were both. You exit the back of the temple and wander into a shaded courtyard where young priestesses are tending to small fires. They stir pots, mix herbs, and chant softly. Some are initiates learning the sacred rites. Others are healers, midwives, or scribes in training. One girl gently taps a stick against a clay tablet, her lips moving in a whisper as she recites hymns to herself. Nearby, another woman older, with dark kohl lining her eyes, teaches a group of younger ones how to interpret omens. She holds up a clay model of a liver and points to various spots while the others nod seriously. You realize that in this world, divine communication often involved animal guts. Yup divination, by inspecting livers, known as extispicy, was a legit science here. You lean in as she explains. If the lobe is misshapen, it could mean disaster for the harvest. If there's a mark on the surface, it might be a sign from the gods to cancel a royal expedition. Honestly, it's all a bit abstract, but these people believe it with the same intensity modern folks might read a stock chart or check their horoscope. And speaking of omens, you head toward the outer courtyard, where stargazers are setting up shop. One priest is adjusting a tall gnomona sort of upright stick for measuring shadows. Others consult tablets covered in star charts. The Sumerians believed that everything on Earth was mirrored in the heavens. If a new star appeared or a planet moved the wrong way, it meant something. What? Well, that depended on who was asking. You sit quietly, listening to them murmur about Jupiter's position and its impact on the fate of the city. One priest claims the moon's unusual path suggests a coming flood. Another disagrees, citing a chicken's dream from the night before. It's a strange blend of observation and improvisation, of cosmic science and superstition. Historians still can't agree on where the line was drawn between real data and ritual belief. But for the Sumerians, it was all one language, the language of signs. Later, you wander back into the main square, passing a group of men sculpting statues from limestone and alabaster. One of them explains that each god has their own pose, their own expression, their own offerings. You see a statue of a god holding a vessel, another standing on the back of a lion, another clutching a tablet. The craftsmanship is detailed, stylized, and deeply symbolic. But not every deity here is famous. Some gods are so local, so obscure, they never made it into textbooks. You pass a tiny shrine to a household god essentially the Sumerian version of a neighborhood watch, and notice someone has left a bundle of reeds and a small fish. It's touching, really. Even in a world of grand temples, people still whisper prayers to the little guys. By late afternoon, the city is hot and buzzing, and you find yourself seated beneath a canopy, sipping a second cup of barley beer, not because you like the taste, but because your lips are dry and it's safer than river water. The temple bells chime in the distance, signaling another ritual. Somewhere behind the ziggurat, drums begin again. You close your eyes for a moment and breathe. All around you, gods are being honored, stars are being charted, livers are being studied, and the gears of sacred economy are turning. It's a place where heaven touches earth, where commerce and cosmos shake hands. And here you are, wedged between myth and math, sipping beer with floating bits in it, wondering how much of this will still echo 5,000 years from now. The smell hits you before anything else. Burning resin, boiled onions, maybe even sheep dung, drying in the sun. Not exactly a spa day, but it's the signature scent of Mesopotamian urban life. You've wandered out of the sacred quarters and into the daily grind, the dusty, noisy, sweat-slick machinery of the world's first cities. It's time to get to work. You follow a narrow road lined with sun-baked walls. Every so often, a doorway reveals a tiny shop or workshop inside. A metalworker is hammering away at copper tools, the rhythmic clink echoing through the street. Sparks flicker as he dunks a blade into a basin of water. Across from him, A potter spins a wheel with his foot while shaping a large storage jar, sweat dripping from his brow. It's not glamorous, but it's honest, and this city runs on it. You pass a row of bakeries, where women in layered linen robes shovel flatbreads into clay ovens that look like upside-down beehives. The air smells amazing, smoky, bready, and warm. You peek inside and see baskets stacked with fresh loaves, their surfaces dotted with sesame or salt. Some are shaped like spirals, others like tiny pillows. A young boy swats flies away, while his mother counts the morning batch aloud. Further down, a brewer is mixing fermented barley mash in a large vat, stirring it with a wooden paddle that has clearly seen better days. This beer is thick, cloudy, and probably better described as drinkable porridge. But it's safer than water and cheaper than wine. You overhear a vendor boasting that his batch was blessed by a temple priest. You're not sure if that makes it taste better or just more expensive. Now, you're in the textile quarter. Women sit on stools, weaving patterned cloth with astonishing precision. The looms creak as threads fly back and forth. One woman pauses to show you a design she's been working on rows of tiny birds in dark red and ochre, dyed from crushed insects and clay pigments. You compliment her work, and she grins, revealing teeth stained slightly blue from chewing dates all morning. The sun climbs higher, and with it comes heat-oppressive, suffocating heat. You take refuge under an awning, where a few men are dicing some kind of fruit, possibly figs. They offer you one. It's sticky, sweet, and filled with seeds that lodge themselves in your teeth like miniature traps. You smile through it and move on. Eventually, you reach a larger open square, bustling with activity. This is the marketplace, the heart of Mesopotamian trade. Merchants have come from miles away, even other cities. You see baskets of salt, sacks of emmer wheat, dried fish wrapped in reeds, dates piled like gold nuggets, and bundles of wool. A man with a crooked smile tries to sell you a copper bracelet. Another offers you a bolt of linen dyed deep indigo. One trader loudly claims his dates are so fresh, they were blessed by Ishtar herself. But it's not just goods being traded, ideas are too. You hear snatches of Akkadian, Elamite, even languages you don't recognize. Mesopotamia wasn't just the land between rivers. It was the crossroads of the ancient world. And even though you're thousands of years from email, this city is buzzing with information. And yes, they had contracts, lots of them. Every sale, every marriage, every goat loaning agreement was carefully carved into clay tablets. You watch two men seal a trade deal, not with a handshake, but with styluses and damp clay. The scribe overseeing the transaction squints, then mutters something under his breath that sounds like ancient Mesopotamian, for you forgot the date line again. You wander into a smaller street where a group of children are playing some sort of throwing game with knucklebones. They shout and laugh, bare feet kicking up dust. One of them runs straight into a cart of onions, toppling a few onto the road. The vendor groans, but lets it slide. Kids will be kids, Evan, in 2700 BCE. A man seated nearby waves you over. Has an older fellow, wrapped in a coarse shawl, surrounded by a modest spread of clay amulets. He claims they offer protection from bad dreams, stomach aches, and ex-wives. You smile politely and move on, though one of the amulets does look suspiciously like your uncle. You pass a low mud brick house where a woman is spreading a mixture of crushed date pits and bitumen across the roof. She's waterproofing it. You ask why, and she shrugs. Rain. But it hasn't rained in weeks. She shrugs again and says, "Still, rain." You get the feeling Mesopotamians are always waiting for the next disaster, whether flood, famine, or a particularly feisty god. And here's something you wouldn't expect: a bathhouse, not with marble and steam like later Roman ones, but a simpler affair: clay tubs, reed mats, and heated stones. You peek inside and see a few people splashing water over their heads while chatting. Cleanliness wasn't just for show. It was a spiritual thing, too. Being clean meant being prepared for prayer, for trade, for a good night's sleep. As the afternoon wears on, you find yourself near the edge of town. Here, the structures thin out. The homes are smaller, the smells stronger. It's where the poorer families, live laborers, herders, reed cutters. You see a man binding a broken sandal with string, a girl chasing a chicken across a courtyard, and a woman teaching her toddler to balance a small water jug on her head. Life here is harder, less polished, but no less human. You sit down on a flat stone to rest, wiping your face with a fold of your robe. A breeze kicks up, hot and dry, sending ripples through the hanging reed curtains. Somewhere behind you, a donkey brays, loud enough to wake the dead. You close your eyes and take it all in: the rhythms, the smells, the noise, the grit. This isn't the Mesopotamia of textbooks and artifacts. This is the living, breathing mess of it. You can feel the weight of its routines pressing gently against your chest. Here, a good day means the bread baked, the taxes didn't increase, and your roof didn't collapse. And tomorrow, they'll do it all again. It's twilight again, and the city begins to exhale. The heat loosens its grip, and the sky fades from searing blue to a calmer, smoky violet. You've spent the day among farmers, bakers, brewers, and weavers. Now, for a brief moment, you get to step into something quieter, something older, something epic. A boy runs past you barefoot, clutching a clay tablet, giggling as he disappears into the shadows. You follow the sounds of music, soft lyre strings, a low hum of voices, and turn into a public courtyard. Families are gathering. The children sit cross-legged up front, the adults behind them on mats. Clay lanterns flicker like lazy fireflies around the edge of the crowd. And in the center, perched on a worn wooden stool, sits an old man with a long beard and a voice like a gravel road at midnight. He clears his throat, and everyone quiets. It's story time. The tale he begins to tell is one you've never heard quite this way before, but the name feels familiar. Gilgamesh has not a king yet in the story, not yet a tyrant, not yet a seeker of immortality, just a wild, larger-than-life figure 2/3 divine, 1/3 human, a ratio that raises some eyebrows, even among modern historians. And his city? Uruk, the very place you've been walking through. Except in the story, it's louder, bigger, and more full of monsters. You lean in as the old man describes Gilgamesh's arrogance, his unmatchable strength, and his disregard for ordinary mortals. The gods, annoyed and maybe a little entertained, decide to send someone to challenge him. Enkidu, a wild man of the steppe, born from clay, covered in hair, and friend to the animals. He drinks with gazelles, wrestles lions, and avoids cities at all costs until he's lured into civilization with bread, beer, and a beautiful woman. Classic Mesopotamian hospitality. The storyteller pauses, letting that last detail settle. A few of the adults chuckle softly. You glance around. Everyone knows this tale. It's been told and retold for centuries, but no one seems tired of it. And tonight, Under this darkening sky, with the first stars blinking into view, it feels new again. Gilgamesh and Enkidu meet. They fight, of course. Two unstoppable forces crashing into each other, like gods tossing furniture. But neither wins. They become friends. Brothers, really. And like all great duos, they set off to do something ridiculously dangerous. Kill Humbaba, the monstrous guardian of the cedar forest. You frown. Cedar forest? That's not something you've seen around here. The old man seems to read your mind. He explains that the great cedar forests were far to the north, in what's now Lebanon, a distant mystical place to the Sumerians filled with towering trees, mountain gods, and things better left undisturbed. But Gilgamesh and Enkidu disturb them anyway. You can almost hear the trees creaking and the birds scattering as the two heroes stomp into the forest, swords drawn. They battle Humbaba part demon, part guardian, all terrifying, and eventually defeat him. But the victory isn't clean. There are omens, warnings. The gods are displeased. Enkidu starts to dream strange things towers falling, birds without wings, stars tumbling into the sea. You shift slightly. Even now, the imagery is haunting. It's no surprise that historians still argue over what the Epic of Gilgamesh means. Is it a tale of heroism? A warning about pride? A meditation on mortality? Probably all of the above. Because soon after, Enkidu dies. The storyteller's voice drops low. The courtyard is silent. The only sounds are the crickets, the distant bark of a dog, and the rustle of someone shifting their weight on a woven mat. Gilgamesh, crushed by grief, wanders into the wilderness. He fights lions with his bare hands. He weeps under the stars. He seeks out Utnapishtim, the immortal survivor of a great flood, to ask him how to avoid death. The gods, however, don't give away that kind of secret easily. You feel something shift inside your chest. It's subtle, but it's there. For all his strength and glory, Gilgamesh becomes deeply human in this moment. Lost, scared, small. He finds Utnapishtim, who tells him the story of the flood, the real one. The one that came before Noah, before the ark, before any rainbow promises. A flood that wiped out nearly everything. Utnapishtim was spared because he built a giant boat, filled it with animals, and waited out the storm. The parallels are eerie. The story predates Genesis by centuries, maybe more. Some scholars believe the biblical flood is just a later echo of this older tale. Others argue they emerged independently. Historians still debate the origins, but the emotional core, the fear of total loss, feels timeless. Back in the story, Gilgamesh is given a test. If he can stay awake for 7 days straight, he'll earn immortality. He fails. Almost instantly. Classic. Utnapishtim then tells him about a magical plant that can restore youth. Gilgamesh finds it, and then promptly loses it to a snake. Yep. A snake slithers in, eats the plant, and sheds its skin, becoming young again. Gilgamesh? He gets a long walk home. The story ends not with triumph, but with acceptance. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk, looks up at its mighty walls, and realizes this is what lasts. Not him, not youth, but the city, the people, the story. The old man falls silent. For a few moments, no one speaks. A baby coos. An ember pops in a nearby brazier. Then the spell lifts, and life returns. Parents gather up their kids. The storyteller stands, stretches, and disappears down a side street. You remain seated, staring into the middle distance. You've just heard one of the oldest recorded stories in the world. A story written in wedge-shaped marks on clay tablets over 4,000 years ago. A story that wrestles with death, grief, love, pride, and purpose. It survived wars, floods, fire, and time itself. And now it lives in you too. Dawn again. You sit up on your rooftop bed in Uruk, the stone still warm beneath your back from yesterday's sun. A few birds flutter past. The scent of fresh ash and yesterday's stew lingers in the air. But this morning feels different. Not just another trip to the market or another temple procession. Today, you're going somewhere new, leaving behind the city of Gilgamesh and stepping into a world where everything is about to change. Because just as Uruk's legends were being carved into clay, a real man flesh, blood, and calloused feet was building something far more permanent than any epic. His name? Sargon. And while you stretch and splash your face with cold river water, word of his conquests is already spreading faster than any caravan can carry. You pack lightly. The road ahead leads northwest, through the shifting boundary where Sumer blends into Akkad. The two cultures have mingled for centuries, through trade, marriage, and mutual side-eye. But under Sargon, they're about to be fused, not just diplomatically, but militarily. You hitch a ride on a cart full of grain. The merchant driving it offers you a piece of dried fig and a warning. They say Sargon can read minds. You laugh nervously, unsure if he's joking. Honestly, in this world, it wouldn't be the strangest thing you've heard. The journey takes several days. You sleep under stars, swat at bugs the size of walnuts, and pass through dusty towns where the locals speak a blend of Sumerian and Akkadian. Their words like soft gravel in your ears. But eventually, the city of Agade rises before you, not as old or storied as Uruk, but raw with energy. Like a teenager who just realized he can lift things no one else can. Agade is loud. The streets are wide, lined with warehouses and scribble offices. You smell fresh-cut timber, hot pitch, and burnt barley. It's a city mid-growth spurt. Canals are being dug, new roads laid, and walls extended. You dodge a crew hauling a heavy stone block with ropes and curses. One man mutters about Sargon's endless building orders as he wipes sweat from his forehead. But who is this Sargon? You ask around. The stories differ wildly. Some say he was born of a temple priestess and left to float in a basket down the river Yeez. That story again. Others claim he was just a gardener's son who got lucky. What we do know, the part that's been stamped into enough clay to count as official. He started as a cupbearer to the king of Kish, got fed up, staged a coup, and then never stopped moving forward. His conquests were methodical and brutal. He crushed the Sumerian cities one by one: Uruk, Ur, Umma, Lagash. He didn't just raid them. He absorbed them, replaced their governors with his own men, took their armies, their scribes, even their gods. Sort of. He didn't abolish local religion. He just rewrote the seating chart. You walk past a new temple under construction. It looks Sumerian, but the carvings along the base? Pure Akkadian flair. You see lions, winged bulls, and stylized stars. And right there in the middle, a depiction of Sargon, standing tall, hands clasped, a single eyebrow raised in what might be divine approval, or just chronic skepticism. You get the sense he wants to be remembered. At a tavern that evening, you sit with a merchant who's been to the far northern edge of Sargon's territory. He claims the empire now stretches from the Persian Gulf to the shores of the Mediterranean. Others scoff, saying no one could control that much land. Historians still argue this pointsome believes Sargon's empire was exaggerated in the king lists. Others point to matching tablets found hundreds of miles apart. Either way, his reach is vast. And the tools he used weren't just swords and chariots. Sargon was a master of administration. You spend time in Agadir's record-keeping district rows of scribes working furiously, copying royal decrees in Akkadian, which is now the official language of governance, even in Sumerian cities. You peek over the shoulder of one scribe who's documenting grain tithes from the city of Nippur. The math is painfully precise, so many shekels of barley per month, per man, per ox. No wonder this civilization needed writing. You feel dizzy just reading it. But not everyone's impressed. You meet a weaver named Luma, her fingers stained red from dye. She shrugs when you mention Sargon. They took my cousin for canal work, said it was a royal draft. He came back with a broken foot and no pay. She lifts a basket of cloth onto her hip and walks off without waiting for a response. That's the thing about empires, they build wide, but not always deep. In the temple district, priests speak of Sargon as favored by the gods, but in the back alleys, people whisper about increased taxes, forced labor, and a ruler who watches more than he listens. You sit near the central canal as the sun dips low. Boats drift past, some carrying grain, others soldiers, a few just fishermen hoping to catch something before night. You spot a barge painted with Sargon's royal crest, a stylized eagle gripping lightning bolts. Subtle, he is not. A passing scholar tells you Sargon declared himself king of the four quarters of the earth. Quite the mouthful, but it stuck. Every document from here on out uses that title. Even his daughters get in on the action. One of them, Enheduanna, becomes the high priestess of the moon god Nana in Ur. She writes hymn-sexual literature. Her works are the oldest known texts in history to be signed by their author. And yes, she was a woman. Take that, Aristotle. As night falls, you climb to a rooftop to sleep. This one's not as cozy as Uruk's Morsut. Less view, but the breeze is cool, and the city lights glow gold and orange below. Somewhere, a drummer taps a slow rhythm. Maybe it's a temple call. Maybe it's a love song. Maybe just someone bored with insomnia in a bucket. You stare at the stars and think about power how quickly it rises, how heavily it weighs, how often it forgets its own roots. Sargon built something that had never existed before, but the cracks are already forming. Empires don't crumble in one day. First they stretch too far, then they lean. Then quietly, they begin to sink. But for now, Akkad stands tall. And tomorrow, you'll see just how far the ripples spread. The morning sun rises behind you now, casting a long shadow over the path ahead. You're leaving Agada Sargon's proud capital and heading back south, toward the familiar curves of the Euphrates. But the land you're returning to isn't the one you left. The Akkadian Empire is in full swing now, and like all empires, it's starting to feel its own weight. You travel with a caravan of traders. They're mostly quiet in the early hours, focused on steering donkeys and avoiding potholes the size of bathtubs. You pass miles of barley fields and palm groves, irrigation canals slicing neatly through the countryside. It's all efficient, geometric, intentional. The Akkadian system is working, but systems don't breathe. People do. You arrive in a town near Nippur and stop for the night. It's a temple city, holy ground for both Sumerians and Akkadians, and it's one of the few places where the tension is always just under the surface. Here, gods still speak in Sumerian. The priests chant in the old tongue, even as tax collectors bark orders in Akkadian. You hear both in the same marketplace, two languages, one empire, one very confused goat vendor trying to sell in both at once. There's something in the air, here pride, resistance, nostalgia. You talk with an old woman outside the temple gate. She sits weaving reed mats and doesn't even glance up when you ask her what she thinks of Sargon. He's not a king, she mutters. Has a wall, and all walls crack. You pause, unsure what she means, but you file it away. The kind of thing people only say when they think no one's listening. In the temple courtyard, priests are preparing for a seasonal festival. Children carry baskets of flowers. A bull is being led in, though, from the look in its eyes. It's not excited about the guest of honor role. Incense smoke coils upward, blurring the carvings on the temple walls. You recognize the face of the moon god Nana, serene and distant, his beard too perfect to be trustworthy. Inside the temple, you meet a young priest named Alil. He's barely older than a teenager, but already speaks with the calm certainty of someone who's memorized every rite. He tells you about a recent decree now. All temples must report harvest yields directly to the imperial scribes. That used to be handled locally, quietly. Now, it's tracked, measured, taxed, redistributed. And what do the gods think of that? You ask. Alil just smiles. They're watching. You step out into the heat again and follow the road east, where villages dot the river like beads on a necklace. You see familiar things, now a mother scolding a child for throwing stones, a fisherman fixing his net, a group of teenage boys daring each other to jump off a canal bridge. But underneath the routine, you sense a tension building. That evening, in a reed hut beside a water wheel, a local farmer invites you to sit with him. His hands are cracked from labor, his eyes yellowed from dust and years. Over a dinner of lentils and roasted onions, he tells you that the water hasn't flowed like it used to. The canal upstream, once shared between 4 towns, now sends more to the one with an Akkadian governor. No debate, no appeal, just clay tablets and soldiers. You can't argue with writing, he says, picking at his food. Once it's on a tablet, it might as well be on the sky. And that's the strange thing about power in this era. It's not enforced with swords alone. It's enforced with styluses, with math, with words. You recall the scribes back in Agade, hunched over tablets, issuing orders with baked clay certainty. A shift in one line of symbols could mean weeks of empty grain jars for a whole town. That night, you sleep under the stars again. The reeds whisper in the wind, and a frog chorus kicks up from a nearby marsh. In the distance, lightning flickers, but there's no thunder. Just that eerie, silent kind. You wonder if the gods are arguing again. The next morning, you reach a town that's just gone, burned, abandoned, or both. Charred timbers poke out of cracked mud brick. The air smells like old smoke and silence. You spot a tablet half buried in the dirt. You pull it free and brush it off. It's an inventory. A list of debts, names, numbers, all recorded as if life was going to go on forever. You drop the tablet back into the dust. On the road, you meet a man traveling with a pack donkey. He used to be a tax collector in Lagash. Now he sells salt. You ask why he left government work. He laughs and shrugs. Too many curses, he says. You threaten a man's grain, he curses you. After a while, the liver priests say, there's no hope. You can't tell if he's joking, because here's another piece of Mesopotamian reality. People believed words had real power, especially when spoken or written in ritual. Curses weren't just petty insults, they were weaponized. Some were etched into foundation bricks, others into tablets hidden beneath statues. You even hear rumors of letters sent to kings that end with lines like, "May your crops wither and your wife grow horns." Fringe? Maybe. But hundreds of these curses have survived, and most are creative enough to qualify as ancient slam poetry. Back on the river, boats move slower now. The dry season creeps in. You sit beside a canal and watch a barge loaded with sacks of grain drift silently past. A child on board waves. You wave back, and they disappear around the bend. You breathe in the hot wind. You think of all the clay tablets being written today, orders, measurements, punishments. The Akkadian system is vast, complex, and shockingly modern in its bureaucracy. But it's brittle. It leans heavily on obedience, on precision, on people following the plan. And people are not always so tidy. You walk back toward the road, the sun heavy on your neck. In the distance, another caravan rolls past, and someone calls out in Akkadian. You can't quite catch the words, but the tone is familiar. Urgent, exhausted, tired of building someone else's empire. You keep walking. You're walking again, feet dusty, lips dry, ears full of distant shouting. Not the kind of shouting you'd expect in a marketplace, either. Something sharper, louder. You pick up your pace. The empire, it seems, is creaking. You arrive at a city called Ur-Yes, that Ur. Once a small town on the river's edge, now rising like a phoenix under new leadership. Massive walls are being rebuilt, canals rerouted, temples restored. And on every corner, people speak the same name with cautious optimism, Ur-Nammu. The Akkadian Empire, once sprawling and unshakable, has faltered. After Sargon's death, his sons struggled to hold the reins. Rebellions flared. Cities defected. Governors turned local again. Eventually, the Gutiansa group of mountain tribes from the northeast swept in like a sandstorm. They didn't build. They burned. They weren't conquerors in the administrative sense. They didn't write new laws or set up bureaucracies. They just looted, wandered, and let the old systems collapse. Historians still argue whether the Gutians were truly responsible for Mesopotamia's so-called Dark Age, or whether they were just a symptom of a larger unraveling. Either way, the years that followed were muddy, messy, and hard to trace. Records stopped. Writing grew scarce. Cities shrank. Roads went unused. It's as if history hit pause. But Ur-Nammu, he hit unpause. You enter Ur at dusk. The gates are freshly plastered, and banners flutter over the rooftops. There's a sense of pride here, like a town that's finally patched its roof and swept its courtyard. You pass a row of new houses, symmetrical, modest, clean. A woman in a long blue robe is painting her front door with river mud mixed with crushed shells. Decoration and blessing, she explains with a smile. The ziggurat looms nearby, tall and geometrically perfect. It's freshly built, none of the crumbling edges you saw in older cities. The steps are sharp, the corners precise. This isn't just a house for the gods, it's a statement. Ur is back, and it wants everyone to know it. You spend the night with a family who hosts traveling scribes. Over dinner lentils again, with a touch of coriander, you listen to the head of the household talk about the new code. Ur-Nammu's code. Written laws, carved in stone, public and permanent. Not just royal decrees, but actual legal standards. What counts as a fair trade, how to settle a land dispute, what to do if someone's ox wanders into your barley field and eats half your crop. It's not perfect, Penalties are harsh, but there's a fairness to it, a shift from arbitrary punishment toward something resembling, well, justice. And unlike the older law traditions, Ur-Nammus code emphasizes monetary fines over bodily harm. Break someone's nose? Pay a fine. Steal their donkey? Compensate. Historians still debate whether this shift came from religious influence, economic practicality, or simply smarter governance. But it marks a real change in how a ruler interacts with his people. You ask if folks trust him. The man shrugs. He hasn't burned anything down yet. That's more than I can say for the last dozen kings. That night, you walk past the ziggurat under moonlight. It's quiet except for the wind and the occasional murmur of temple guards. The structure glows softly, its bricks still pale from recent construction. A priestess emerges from a side chamber and tosses something into a brazier, herbs, maybe, or powdered incense. The flame flares, then settles. You ask her what she prayed for. For stability, she says. Then after a pause, and for the accountants to lose my barley records. The next morning, you wander through the scribal quarter. Children recite multiplication tables. Older students copy legal texts. You sit beside one and peek at his tablet. It's a contract for the purchase of a field complete with date, witnesses, and a clause about the drainage ditch. Mesopotamians love a good ditch clause. You notice something else. The language. It's still Sumerian. Even after centuries of Akkadian rule, the old tongue is hanging one specially in temples, schools, and law. It's ceremonial now, used for prestige, for tradition. But it's still there, echoing through every corner of Ur. And you realize, this city isn't just rebuilding itself. It's stitching the past into its present. You stop by a construction site where men are dragging stone blocks with ropes. A foreman yells about alignment and angle. One of the workers wipes his brow and tells you they're building a drainage system to divert floodwater from the residential quarter. You nod. Practical. Smart. The kind of thing cities forget when they get too full of themselves. Ur-Nammu seems to remember. You ask someone where the king is today. Off in Lagash, comes the reply, setting up a new governor. Another chimes in, or maybe writing poems. It's said Ur-Nammu enjoyed music and literature as much as engineering and tax reform. A multitasker. By midday, the streets are full. Merchants unload baskets of fish, sacks of dates, bolts of cloth. A teacher leads a group of students past the canal, lecturing about the sacred geometry of ziggurats. You catch a few phrases, something about divine proportions and the ratio of base to height. You pretend to understand. And then you hear drums. A procession is moving down the central street. Musicians, dancers, priests, even a few acrobats. It's not a holy day, so you ask someone what's going on. Just practice, they say. You can't let the festival sneak up on you. You grin. Of course not. That evening, you sit on the steps of a house, watching the sun set over the river. The water reflects the orange sky like melted gold. A boy walks by carrying a clay tablet. You ask what's on it. My father's will, he says. He says I have to share the goats. You nod solemnly. Goats are serious business. As the stars emerge, you look out over Earth's city that rebuilt itself from ash and silence, that wrote laws not just for kings, but for commoners, that remembered how to be human after the chaos. And somewhere inside you, a small voice whispers, things can get better. You're still in Ur. Same dusty courtyards, same sweeping ziggurat rising above the rooftops. But things have changed. Not all at once, slowly, quietly, like a roof beam warping under the weight of 100 hot seasons. Ur-Nammu is gone now. He left behind strong walls, a fair code, and a city reborn from ashes. But the future, it seems, belongs to his son. You hear his name everywhere. Shulgi. Shulgi the runner. Shulgi the reformer. Shulgi the god. You wake to the sound of drum slow, deliberate, ceremonial. Today is one of his royal appearance days. You join the growing crowd in the central square, where people are already fanning themselves and whispering. A herald steps forward, standing on a wooden platform, and begins to read from a clay tablet. The words are loud, precise, and very flattering. Shulgi, mighty king, king of Ur, king of the 4 quarters of the world. He who strengthens the roads, who multiplies the scribes, who runs from Nippur to Ur in a single day. Wait, what? You glance around. Did anyone else catch that? Apparently not. People are nodding, murmuring appreciation. A few even applaud. But you do the math in your head. That's nearly 100 miles, on foot, in Mesopotamian heat, in sandals, with no Gatorade. Historians still debate whether Shulgi actually made that run or simply commissioned some excellent poetry to say he did. Either way, it's been recorded in cuneiform, so now it's official history. Later that morning, you follow a group of scribes heading toward the administrative district. This part of the city has grown in recent years. More buildings, more guards, more noise. Inside, a stone bench is worn smooth from constant traffic. You sit and watch as scribes shuffle clay tablets between rooms, muttering about barley tallies, tax codes, and land redistribution. You talk to a young scribe named Dagon. His hands are stained with red clay, and his eyes are a little too tired for someone his age. We're updating the tax rates again? He sighs, because the last update wasn't aggressive enough. He chuckles dryly, but there's no humor in it. Taxes have changed. So have the punishments. Under Shulgi, the legal reforms continue, but with sharper edges. Fines are higher. Deadlines tighter. The empire is more efficient, yes, but it's also less forgiving. That afternoon, you visit a weaver's quarter. A woman named Eri is hunched over a loom, threading deep blue wool through a wooden frame. She nods at you and gestures for you to sit. My daughter was chosen, she says quietly, not looking up. For temple service? One of Shulgi's selections. You nod, not sure what to say. She's only 9, Eri continues. But they said the omens were clear. She belongs to the moon god now. She pulls the thread tighter than needed. The fabric stretches. You don't ask anything else. You wander the city for hours. Things are clean, controlled. The roads are straighter. The scribal schools are larger. Soldiers stand on more corners than before. The temples are grander too, but they don't feel entirely like they used to. You pass a mural depicting Shulgi alongside the gods. Not beneath them, next to them. His the same size, same glow, same presence. You pause. So does a man walking behind you. He leans in and whispers, "The king walks with the gods now." That's what they tell us. You ask if he believes it. He shrugs. I believe he wants us to. You spend the evening at a small inn near the ziggurat. Over lentil stew and flatbread, a merchant from Mari tells stories of the royal couriersmen who can carry urgent messages from one end of the empire to the other in just days, using way stations, rest stops, and the occasional boat. It works, he says between mouthfuls. Until it doesn't. What do you mean? You ask. He wipes his hands on his robe. Well, when one link fails, say, a road floods, or a town rebels, where a governor goes silent, the whole message chain collapses. Fast. Outside, a street musician plays a soft tune on a reed flute. A few children dance, laughing and clapping their hands. You watch them for a while, thankful for the simplicity. The next morning, you visit Nippur again, the religious heart of the empire. It's busier than last time. Priests bustle. Offerings are stacked high. Temple guards scan the crowds with steady eyes. You walk quietly, keeping your head down. Inside, the prayers are louder, the chants longer, and Shulgi's name now appears in almost every verse. You overhear one priest speaking to a group of novices. The king is no longer merely a man. He is chosen. He is divine. One of the boys looks confused. The priest continues, "We do not worship him instead of the gods. We worship him through them. The difference feels thin." You step outside, needing air. By the canal, you sit beside a fisherman mending his net. His hands move slowly, expertly. He doesn't speak for a long time. Finally, he says, "There's a saying now. If your house collapses, it is the will of Shulgi." You raise an eyebrow. "It used to be the gods who got blamed," he adds with a dry chuckle. You stay beside him until the sun begins to set. The city glows gold again, just like before. The ziggurat rises, solid and eternal, but the shadows it casts seem longer now. You think about power, about ambition, about belief. Shulgi has done more than rule. He has reshaped memory, rewritten rituals, recast himself not just as a king, but as a cornerstone. But foundations can crack. You lie down on the bank of the canal, the earth still warm beneath you. Above, the stars slowly blink into view. Somewhere in the city, a scribe is scratching out another line of praise. Somewhere else, a family is packing up to leave before the next tax decree arrives. And you drift between the two, still watching, still listening, still waiting for what comes next. The next weeks are spent on the move again. You leave the grand boulevards of Ur and head east past barley fields just beginning to ripen, through villages where donkeys outnumber people, and into quieter stretches of land where the rivers flow slow and brown, like thick silk unraveling across the plains. You're following a hunch this time. Or maybe it's just curiosity. Because beyond the cities and monuments, beyond the kings and gods, there's another Mesopotamia own, made not of law codes and ziggurats, but of ovens and sandals and gossip over cracked clay mugs. It's time to find out what everyday life actually felt like. Your first stop is a small village near Lagash. No walls, no temples, no statues. Just rows of squat homes with flat roofs, goats tied to fig trees, and a group of barefoot children chasing a goose with the single-minded chaos only children can manage. A woman waves you in. Her name is Tomtu. Her tunic is dusty, her smile wide, and she's stirring a pot of something that smells like garlic, lentils, and optimism. You sit on a woven mat while she tells you about her week. It's the planting season, so she's been helping her neighbors redig an irrigation channel clogged with reeds. Her husband works at a nearby pottery kiln. One of her sons is being trained as a scribe. He has good memory, she says, but terrible handwriting. Her youngest keeps insisting their neighbor is a shape-shifting demon, which might be true, considering the number of times she's accidentally taken their chickens. You chuckle. Life here is slower, but not simple. Meals are boiled, not baked. Bathing is done with reed brushes and a cracked bowl of warm water. The toilet is a pit lined with stones and scrubbed out once a week, if you're lucky. When it rains, which isn't often, the roofs leak. When it doesn't rain for too long, the wells run low. But there's rhythm, community, laughter. Tom, too, gives you a small clay bowl filled with a thick date paste. It's sweet and chewy. You thank her, and she nods toward the hearth where flatbread bakes beneath hot stones. No one starves if the neighbors like you, she says with a wink. You spend the afternoon helping her spread fresh mud along the base of the house. Repairs are constant. The bricks here aren't baked, just sun-dried, and every season wears them down. Still, with enough hands and enough mud, anything can stand again. That's kind of the motto around here. Later, you follow her to the local well. It's a communal space, half for gathering water and half for catching up on everything that's happened since yesterday. A man is loudly declaring that his ox has been cursed. A girl is reciting a dream she had about fish with human faces. An old woman claims the moon was too close last night and someone needs to pray about it. It's a lot, but it's lively, and somewhere in the noise, you catch the shape of something deeper, a culture where myths and chores blend so seamlessly you can't tell which is which, where every stubbed toe could be a sign, and every broken pot might be the work of an annoyed spirit. Historians sometimes call this folk religion. You just call it Tuesday. That evening, you join a group for dinner. There's stew, bread, some kind of pickled vegetable that tastes like regret, and a jug of beer thick enough to chew. It's not glamorous, but it's good. The kids are loud. The elders tell the same stories they told last week. And someone's playing a 3-stringed instrument that sounds halfway between a harp and a mosquito. You lie on the roof that night, staring up at the stars. No kings, no guards, no temples. Just the creak of the house settling, the low murmur of neighbors chatting, and the occasional owl asking who let the goats onto the roof again. You sleep like a brick. The next morning, you wake to smoke nothing dangerous, just breakfast. Tom, too, hands you a warm flatbread wrapped around mashed beans and a sprinkle of salt. You eat in silence, watching the sun rise over the fields. Later, you head toward the fields to join a group of workers clearing a canal. It's hot, sticky, and full of biting flies. One man slaps at his arm and mutters that this entire marsh is cursed by a goddess he made fun of once. No one argues. They just keep digging. The work is coordinated by a foreman with one eye, a booming voice, and a strong opinion about the proper slope for runoff channels. There's no blueprint, no map, just experience, passed down from generations of men who've learned to listen to the land more than to tablets. And yet, those tablets still matter. After lunch, a tax collector arrives. He sits on a crate, pulls out a waxed leather pouch, and removes a tablet and stylus. Names are called. Grain owed is announced. One man protests that his harvest was ruined by wind spirits. The tax collector raises an eyebrow and writes his name anyway. You glance at the tablet. The system is neat, organized, unforgiving. Everything accounted for except the little things. The blight, the broken shovel, the sick daughter, the lost hour because your donkey decided to take a nap in the middle of the road. You help carry the last of the reeds into a storage hut. A boy asks you where you're from. You tell him you're just passing through. He nods solemnly, then asks if you've ever seen a talking fish. You tell him not yet, but you're hopeful. That night, as the village winds down, you walk alone through the outer fields. The stars are brilliant, the ground cool. Somewhere in the darkness, a jackal howls. You pause and listen. This is Mesopotamia too. Not just kings and empires, but farmers and firewood, cracked bowls and inside jokes, 1,000 different voices echoing across the centuries, not in stone inscriptions, but in laughter, gossip, and footsteps worn into dirt paths. And you've only just scratched the surface. You're still moving through the land between rivers. But something has changed. By now, the dust has settled into your sandals. You've learned how to hold a clay bowl without burning your hands. You can recognize barley by smell alone. And yet, for all the familiarity, there's one part of Mesopotamian life that continues to feel immense, mysterious, and oddly personal. The gods. They're not up in the clouds. They're not out of reach. They are here in the bricks, in the wind, in the space between two reeds. And whether you're royalty or a reed cutter, you live in a world where invisible forces are never far away. So today, you're not headed to a market, or a palace, or a canal. You're following the sacred. You're listening for footsteps that leave no prints. Your first stop is a small roadside shrine of mud brick alcove, barely taller than a man, tucked under a sycamore tree. A woman with clay-streaked hands is sweeping out dust with a bundle of straw. She gestures for you to approach, then points to a small figurine sitting inside the shrine. He watches the road, she says, keeps travelers safe, unless you forget to greet him. You blink. What happens if you forget? She shrugs. Your donkey steps in a hole, or the axle breaks, or maybe your wine spoils before you get where you're going. She says it so matter-of-factly, like reciting a recipe. A little barley, a little salt, and always acknowledge the road god. You nod and whisper a polite hello to the statue, just to be safe. You continue your journey towards Sipar, one of the major religious cities in the region. The road there is flanked by temples big and small, and each seems to hum with activity. Priests in spotless linen sweep courtyards. Temple workers haul baskets of fruit and flowers toward high altars. A group of children rehearses a ritual dance in the square. Their steps are uneven, their giggles loud, but a nearby priestess watches with pride. At the heart of Sipar rises the grand temple of Shamash, the god of the sun, of truth, and of divine justice. His emblem is a solar disk surrounded by jagged rays. It hangs above the temple gates like a golden eye. You step through the entrance and are immediately swallowed by cool shadow, incense smoke, and whispered prayers. A judge is holding court in an open hall. Two men argue over a property line. A scribe records every word. Above them, carved into the stone wall, is Shamash seated, majestic, rays pouring from his shoulders. Speak truly, the judge warns, or the sun will find you. You feel a chill crawl up your spine. Outside the temple, you sit with a young novice named Lumasu, has learning temple astronomy, and offers to show you some of his tablets. One of them has careful records of the moon's path. Another lists star patterns and their meanings. If Mars appears too close to the moon, he explains, there may be war in the west. Have you ever seen that happen? You ask. He pauses. No. But I don't want to see it. Omens. They're everywhere. You stop at a potter's workshop later that day and find him rubbing a strange symbol onto the side of a bowl before baking it. Protection against envy, he says. A woman at the market wears a necklace shaped like a lion. To please Ishtar, she explains, and to keep my sister-in-law from starting drama. People consult dreams. They study the behavior of birds. They measure shadows. And of course, they read the livers of sheep. You're invited to observe one such ritual. It takes place just before sunset. A priest leads a small group to a courtyard. A sheep is gently laid on a platform. A quick prayer. Then the liver is removed, washed, and laid on a clay model labeled with sacred zones. You try not to wince. The priest studies the folds and veins of the liver like a doctor reading x-rays. He points to a bulge. This, he announces, is not a good sign. You glance at the man who requested the reading. He nods solemnly and mutters, "Then we wait to plant the wheat." Later that night, you speak with a temple librarian. He shows you shelves lined with clay tablets, incantations, omens, rituals, spells. Some for healing, some for blessings, some for cursing. "You can curse someone?" you ask, half joking. He looks at you dead serious. "Yes, but only if you've been wronged." He pulls a tablet from the shelf and begins to read. "May your harvest be eaten by rats. May your sandals always be wet. May your wife whisper to your neighbor when you sleep." It's weirdly poetic and weirdly specific. Historians still debate how seriously these curses were taken. Some were formal legal tools, others private outbursts baked into tablets and buried in temple walls. But enough of them survive to show that people believed words had real power, especially when spoken in the right way, in the right place. You spend the next day visiting a smaller temple dedicated to Gula, goddess of healing. Her emblem is the dog known for its loyalty, and in Mesopotamia, for its ability to lick wounds clean. Several statues of dogs line the altar, their faces serene and slightly comical. Inside, a woman waits her turn to receive an herbal poultice for her son's cough. Another clutches a clay amulet shaped like a paw. You overhear the healer reciting a spell while grinding herbs. "By the breath of Gula, by the warmth of the fire, let the sickness pass through you like water from a broken jar." You leave the temple with a dried flower tucked into your satchel. The healer insists it helps with clarity, or memory, or at least with warding off bad luck. You don't argue. That evening, you sit along the banks of the Euphrates, the sky painted orange and purple. A group nearby sings a lullaby to the moon, not to entertain children, but to honor Nana, the moon god, whose rise each night marks the passage of time and tides. You lie back and listen. In Mesopotamia, religion isn't Sunday morning. It's every breath. It's in the flick of a sparrow's wing, the crack in a pot, the way the wind moves through the reeds. The gods don't live far away. They live with you, around you, inside your neighbor's oven, under your bed. They're not just watching. They're part of the story. You wake to a gentle breeze and the faint clatter of pottery being stacked for market. The city is just beginning to stir, and the air still holds the coolness of night. A woman walks past your doorway with a basket of herbs balanced on her head. A dog yawns and stretches in the alley. Somewhere, a rooster declares war on the quiet. Today, you're not heading toward temples or palaces. You're not here to watch kings issue proclamations or priests read omens from the stars. No, today is about the other half of Mesopotamia, the half that doesn't make it into epic poetry or royal inscriptions. You're going to live a day in the rhythm of the ordinary. Your hosts, Rabia, and her family have already been up for an hour. Their courtyard smells like baked onions and warm bread. Rabia hands you a piece of flatbread straight from the tanner, their clay oven, and it nearly burns your fingers. You let it cool on your palm while sipping water flavored with crushed mint and something she says is for stomach demons. You nod. It tastes like licorice and alarm bells. Her husband, Etel, is already at the weaving quarter where he works. Her eldest son is grinding grain outside using a stone quern, while the younger children take turns chasing each other with what looks like a doll made from knotted rags and goat hair. You offer to help with chores, and Rabia gladly accepts. Soon, you're collecting kindling from the edge of the canal and helping her smear a fresh coat of mud along the courtyard wall. It's drying and cracking in spots, so she mixes in straw and even a little dung. It sticks better, she says cheerfully. Just don't breathe in too deep. Around mid-morning, you follow her to the local market. It's bustling, not in the chaotic, shouting sense of Ur's great square, but in a way that feels lived in, comfortable, familiar. A woman sells baskets woven from palm fronds. A man offers dried fish, some already wrapped in reed leaves, others glaring up from open trays. You stop at a stall where a boy no older than 8 is measuring out lentils with a scoop carved from a hollowed gourd. His mother corrects him quietly when he gives too generous a portion. Rabia haggles over onions like it's a competitive sport. She wins. You notice the mix of languages as you pass different stalls. Sumerian, Akkadian, even a bit of Elamite here and there. Traders call out greetings and prices in multiple tongues. One man jokes that his dates are so sweet, Inanna herself would blush. You're not sure that's technically theologically accurate, but it makes a few customers laugh. You pause at a pottery stall where a craftsman is carving a seal into the base of a jar. It's not decorative, it's a signature. Proof that the pot was made by his hands, at his kiln, on this day. He explains that if the jar breaks and someone blames his workmanship, the seal can defend him. Clay remembers, he says, wiping sweat from his brow. You head back home with Rabia, just as the sun hits its peak. The air grows heavy. Even the dogs lie flat in the shade. Lunch is simple barley cakes with a yogurt sauce, a stew of lentils and leeks, and sliced cucumbers with salt and vinegar. You sit under a reed mat, legs crossed, and watch as the family eats with fingers and clay spoons, passing bowls around with quiet familiarity. Afterward, there's a rest period. Not sleep exactly, just a slowing down. The children doze. Rabia picks lint from a shawl. You sit and sip warm beer from a shared cup. It's thick and frothy, and you're still not used to the chewiness. She tells you it's better during festival season, when the temples bless the barrels. You try not to imagine what's floating in it. Later in the day, Etel returns from the weaving yard. He smells like dust and dye and sun. He's carrying a roll of finished fabric and a bruise on his thumb. The loom fought back, he says with a grin. You ask to see his workshop, and he agrees. The weaving yard is half outdoors, half shaded by hanging mats. Upright looms stretch high, with rows of colored threads like muted rainbows. Workers sit on the ground, pulling and knotting fibers in rhythm. A girl hums as she threads. A boy next to her mumbles the multiplication tables under his breath. When you ask why, he says it helps him keep track of the pattern repeats. Etel shows you how the weights at the bottom of the threads keep everything taut. It's like life, he says. Tension makes the cloth strong. You spend an hour watching hands fly across frames, turning rough fiber into patterned cloth. The designs aren't random, many follow temple-licensed patterns, and others mark family or city identity. Some even carry protective meanings, woven with small symbolic forms, a zigzag for water, a diamond for fertility, a spiral for protection. By dusk, the family returns home. Rabia is cooking again, this time a dish with chickpeas, coriander, and what she calls market mystery spice. You eat as the courtyard fills with the gentle sounds of neighbors talking over walls, someone playing a flute 3 houses down, and children shouting over a game of knucklebones. You sit with the family as Etel scratches a quick note into a clay tablet, just a tally of fabric lengths completed. His youngest daughter leans over and draws a cat beside it. He laughs and lets it stay. After the meal, Rabia offers you a small ceramic amulet. It's shaped like a leaf, with a faint symbol pressed into one side. For safe travels, she says, and to keep dreams from wandering too far. You thank her, carefully placing it in your satchel. Later, you climb to the roof to sleep, just like they do. The stars overhead are sharp and endless. A cool wind drifts in from the canal. Somewhere, a goat bleats once, then goes silent. You lie back on a woven mat, your arms folded behind your head. And for the first time since arriving in Mesopotamia, you don't feel like an outsider. You feel like a neighbor, a part of the hum and rhythm of a life lived without monuments or kings or war-just family, food, laughter, and the slow, steady movement of time marked not by empire, but by bread rising on hot stone. You wake before the sun. The air is still cool, still soft, and the streets of Nippur are quieter than usual, except for the gentle sweep of a broom across a temple courtyard and the occasional bray of a mule who clearly has no regard for anyone's peaceful morning. Today, your feet aren't carrying you to market. You're not helping grind barley or watching omens in the entrails of sheep. Today is about knowledge, not just the kind you stumble into, like which neighbor bakes the best date cakes, or how not to anger the water god, but the kind that's preserved, practiced, studied, the kind that gets written down, tablet after tablet, even when the sun is punishing and the clay stings your fingers. Because this is Mesopotamia, the land not only of rivers, but of records. And you're heading toward a quiet corner of the temple complex where something remarkable is happening, and has been, for centuries. The scribal school, or, as the locals call it, the Iduba, the tablet house. It's not grand. There are no golden statues or walls painted with lions. From the outside, it's little more than a long clay room with sloped walls, sun-warped wooden shelves, and a faint smell of soot and old dust. But inside? Inside are hundreds, maybe thousands of tablets. Some are stacked, some tucked into clay jars, others crumbled into corners where students probably flung them in frustration. Each one is a voice from the past, a preserved breath, a moment someone cared enough to press into earth and bake in fire. You're greeted by Elushu again, the thin, bright-eyed scribe you met days ago. Today, his hands are already streaked with mud. He's holding a fresh tablet and shaking his head. Too soft, he mutters, like a priest's excuse. He gestures for you to sit beside him at a long workbench. The other scribes glance over, but don't seem to mind your presence. Most are younger boys around 12, maybe 15, hunched over their work like monks, styluses clicking softly as they copy the same passage again and again. You peek over one boy's shoulder and see a familiar proverb: "He who eats too much must dig many latrines." Some things really are universal. Elushu hands you a different tablet, this one covered edge to edge with lists, trees, animals, occupations, measurements. It's the ancient equivalent of a textbook, only heavier and more permanent. "These are our word lists," he explains. Before you can write stories, you must know the words. You point to a column that seems to be just fish. He nods. 15 different kinds. Most are edible. Some are insults. You raise your eyebrows. Call someone a muddy-gilled carp, and you'll see. Historians still argue whether these word lists were only for school drills, or if they also served as dictionaries, scribal reference guides, or even religious codices. What's clear is that Mesopotamians didn't just write, they organized, classified, and systematized their world into tablets, labels, and formulas. Later in the morning, Ilushu shows you the astronomy records. Watch carefully, he says, placing a polished tablet between you. It's covered in star diagrams, angular measurements, and cryptic symbols. He points to one, a thick crescent with a line beneath it. That's the moon's first rise. If it's cloudy, we wait. But if it's clear, we record everything. Shadow length, position, time. You ask why it matters. He shrugs. Because it does. If Venus rises before dawn, the harvest might fail. If the moon disappears too early, the king could die. Or live longer. Or nothing happens. But we always write it down. You laugh, but it's not a joke. They're deadly serious. Mesopotamian scribes tracked the skies with a devotion that today would belong to scientists, but with a worldview rooted deeply in omen and godly will. They knew the heavens moved in patterns, and with enough observation, they believed you could glimpse fate itself. You ask how many stars he can name. Ilushu grins. 32 that matter. 17 more if you want to impress a girl. The classroom quiets as a teacher enters an older man with a reed-thin voice and a clay-scarred face. He nods to you, but speaks only to his students. Today, we copy the code. You lean closer and see a boy begin to write the opening lines of a famous legal text. If a man destroys the eye of another man, they shall destroy his eye. You recognize it. The Code of Hammurabi. Or a version of it, at least. As the students work, the teacher walks between them, correcting stylus angles, clarifying symbols. Occasionally, he recites rules aloud like lullabies. If a builder's house collapses and kills the owner, the builder must be put to death, he says, almost gently. You whisper to Ilushu, seems harsh. He replies, better houses that way. By afternoon, your back aches from crouching. Ilushu invites you to stretch your legs with a walk to the tablet kiln. It's a pit outside the school where finished works are fired and hardened. As you approach, a group of students is carefully placing damp tablets on a rack while an older boy fans the fire below. This one holds the king's grain totals, he explains. He wants them to last. You ask how long they'll survive. He shrugs. As long as the gods don't flood us. Spoiler. They will. Later you visit the library itself. It's not grand, like the ones in fantasy books. No spiral staircases or velvet-bound tomes. Just shelves carved into clay walls, lined with tablets categorized by subject. Medicine, omens, math, contracts, hymns. You find one tablet with a healing charm, another with a recipe for ink. One is just a list of complaints. Neighbor's donkey keeps eating my garden. Filed 3 times. No response. You laugh. Bureaucracy. Eternal. By evening, you sit with Ilushu on the rooftop, watching the first stars blink into place. He says nothing for a long time, just stares. Finally, he says, I wanted to be a soldier, but then I saw what writing could do. You ask if he regrets it. He shakes his head. Words last longer than swords. And with that, he hands you a blank tablet. Here, he says, write your name. You hesitate, then press the stylus into the clay. The lines wobble. The symbol is lopsided. It's not perfect, but it's yours. It's real. And in this land of dust and stars and memory pressed into mud, that means something. The stars begin to fade, one by one, as a pale gray light washes over the marshes. The city is behind you, know its towers, its temples, even its noise. You've traded cobbled streets and courtyards for reeds that whisper and water that never stops moving. Your guide this morning, if he can be called that, is a man named Naram. He barely speaks, and when he does, it's usually just to say, walk, or duck, or don't step there. You quickly learn to listen. He leads you through the soft outer edge of Nipper, where mud brick walls give way to open fields and grazing paths. The ground here is different, softer, darker, and somehow alive underfoot. The air hums with bugs and the wet hush of moving water. You can't see the river yet, but you can feel it. It's in the breeze, the thick dew on your arms, and the low rustle of papyrus shifting like distant applause. Naram finally stops beside a small boat. Wellboat is a generous word. It's a clumsy-looking thing, made from tightly bundled reeds, just wide enough for two, and just sturdy enough to inspire doubt. You look at him. It floats. He grunts. And so, you climb in. The boat rocks like it's not quite sure it trusts you, but eventually steadies. Naram pushes off with a long pole, and the city vanishes behind a wall of green. You drift. At first, it's hard to tell where you're going. Every direction looks the same. Water channels tangled with plants, low islands dotted with willows, and herons standing like grumpy statues. But slowly, a pattern emerges. The channels widen and narrow in rhythm. Birds fly in arcs. Fishermen cast nets with practiced grace. Even the insects seem to buzz in time with the paddles. This is real Mesopotamia, Naram finally says. Not stone, not gods. This. You nod, watching a boy paddle past with a basket of turtles. Hez no older than 8 and already steering like a veteran. In the distance, a woman washes clothes at the edge of a muddy bank. A flock of ducks drifts by, unconcerned. The further you go, the more the river opens up, and the more the land begins to breathe. The silt glistens under the morning sun. Palm trees cast broken shadows across the water. The breeze carries scents of wet earth, reeds, and something vaguely fishy you decide not to question. Eventually, you arrive at a marshland hamlet. It's not marked by gates or walls or statues. Just a few mud brick houses sitting high on packed mounds, their roofs made of woven reed mats. Dogs sleep in doorways. Chickens dart between puddles. There are no soldiers here, no scribes, just farmers, fishers, and people who know exactly how high the river will rise each spring. You're greeted by a woman named Dita, who gives you a piece of flatbread and points toward the field without a word. It's harvest time. You follow her to a patch of barley swaying in the wind. The stalks are dry, the color of desert sand, and your task, clearly understood without being spoken, is to help bundle them. She hands you a sickle with a worn wooden handle and shows you the motion once, then walks away. You start cutting. It's slow work, repetitive, scratchy. Your hands sting with every motion, and the sun climbs higher with every breath. A child nearby is singing a song about a goat who married a fish, while his sister stacks the barley you cut. She works twice as fast as you, probably in her sleep too. You pause for water at mid-morning, joining the family beneath a stretched hide for shade. They pass around a jug of barley water and some slices of dried melon. No one speaks much. They just chew, rest, wipe their brows, and then it's back to work. In the afternoon, You follow Naram along the irrigation ditch's narrow channels carved from earth, full of slowly moving water. He explains how each ditch must be cleared weekly, or it clogs, how the water gates are opened in turns so each field drinks enough, but not too much, how arguments about water rights sometimes lead to thrown sandals, or worse clay tablets filed at the city court. You spot a group of boys up to their knees in one of the canals, dragging a net between them. One shouts, and they all scramble to pull it in. The catch? 4 fish, 1 shoe, and a rock shaped suspiciously like a god's head. They cheer anyway. Back in the village, you help patch a wall with mud and straw. It's not glamorous, but you quickly learn the rhythm grab, smear, slap, smooth. A baby goat keeps nibbling your tunic. You give up trying to shoo it away and accept your fate as goat furniture. By evening, the sky bleeds orange over the fields. The work slows. The air softens. A man plays a stringed instrument while women shell beans and gossip about someone named Enlil, who apparently can't keep a secret. The laughter is low, rhythmic, familiar. Dinner is a stew of lentils, onions, and something that might be turtle. You don't ask. It's delicious either way. You eat with your hands, sharing a clay bowl with 3 others. The girl next to you hands you a piece of warm bread without a word. You smile. She doesn't smile back, but gives you the last piece of onion, which might mean the same thing. That night, you sleep on a woven mat beneath the open sky. The stars here feel brighter, closer. The marsh hums with life frogs, birds, insects, and something that sounds like a small elephant, but is probably just a cow. You lie there, thinking about how far you've come. Not just from city to country, but from the idea of Mesopotamia as stone and law and war to this. This muddy, honest, breathing place. A place where history isn't carved in monuments, but planted, watered, harvested, and eaten. Where time is measured not in kingly rains, but in flood seasons and barley bundles. And how many fish were caught before sunset. And as you drift off, belly full, hands sore, the breeze curling around your ankles like a sleeping dog, you realize something simple and profound. Civilization didn't just happen in the cities. It happened because of places like this. The rooster that wakes you isn't exactly enthusiastic. It sounds like it's coughing out its morning duties rather than crowing. But it does the job. You sit up, brush a few straw bits from your hair, and stretch until your spine makes a sound not unlike an old clay hinge. Your feet still ache from yesterday's walk through the marshlands. Your shoulders? Let's not talk about them. But today's different. You're not just wandering for scenery or helping with harvest. Today, you're tracing the path of power. You're following the grain. You meet Naram again at the village edge. He's already loaded up 2 tired-looking donkeys with sacks of barley. Not the fancy polished kind you'd find in a temple pantry. This is field fresh, dust-covered, slightly uneven grain. Honest grain. He nods at you once, the Mesopotamian equivalent of let's go. And so, you go. The sun is still low when you set off. The path is little more than packed dirt winding between canal ditches and fig trees. Occasionally another caravan passes, some bringing clay pots, others herding goats, one very grumpy man carrying a giant wheel of cheese like it owes him money. Naram gestures to a family trudging by with sacks on their backs. Temple quota, he says. They keep 1/3? You blink. That's it? He shrugs. Better than war. That's not comforting, but okay. After several hours of walking, interrupted only by brief stops, to adjust a crooked sack, or rescue one donkey from sniffing every single bush. You arrive at a low complex just outside the city, the grain depot. It doesn't look like much. Mud brick walls, a central courtyard, a few dusty awnings for shade, but it's buzzing. Laborers haul sacks. Scribes sit at makeshift desks. Styluses scratching. Overseers shout numbers. And beneath it all, the soft rumble of Mesopotamian logistics doing its thing. You follow Naram to a shaded corner where a tall, sunburned clerk with ink-stained fingers approaches. She doesn't ask your name, just the number on your seal. Naram recites it. She nods, then gestures to one of the workers, who begins to unload the barley sacks while muttering to himself in a tone that suggests this is sack number 342 today. Each sack is weighed using a hanging scale of stones and cords. The results are marked not on paper, of course, but on small clay tablets with quick, practice symbols. The scribe dips her stylus into a bowl of wet clay and slaps down number after number like a Mesopotamian accountant on a deadline. This batch goes to the temple kitchen, she says without looking up. You follow her to a separate section of the courtyard where other goods are being sorted. Clay, jars of lentils, baskets of onions, dried fish tied up with palm rope, and stacks of bread so dry they could probably double as roof tiles. Here, you learn about the redistributive economy. Food doesn't just go to market and vanish into private pockets. In Mesopotamia, especially during its temple-driven eras, most food was taxed, stored, and reallocated. Workers got rations. Priests got better rations. Soldiers got whatever they wanted. The rest was divided, stored, or bartered. She hands you a ration tablet. It's small, triangular, and packed with cuneiform. This one is for a temple weaver, she says. 2 liters barley, 1 liter beer, half a loaf per day. Extra if she's pregnant. You ask what happens if the barley comes up short. She raises an eyebrow. We find out who's been shaving the bags. Then we fine them, or dock their rations. And if that doesn't work, then we stop feeding their donkey. Harsh, but effective. You help carry a few of the jars into the storehouse, a cool, dark room lined with shelves and sealed clay vessels. Each jar is marked with a seal impression. Some lions, others bulls, one with a very angry-looking chicken. Personal emblems, she explains. Each administrator has one. If the seal's broken before it should be, someone's in trouble. You spot a stack of tablets beside the door. What are those? Receipts, she says. Also complaints. Lots of complaints. You pick one up, squinting at the lines. Is this one about onions? She sighs. A farmer says his onions were swapped with inferior ones during transport. Claims he can tell by the smell. Honestly, he's probably right. You laugh, imagining a Mesopotamian Karen demanding to see the scribe in charge. Around midday, the granary courtyard clears for a small ritual. A priest dressed in simple linen, with an oil-slicked beard sprinkles incense onto a small fire and chants a few lines to Enlil, the grain god. It's not elaborate, just reverent. Because here, grain is more than food. It's survival. It's currency. It's memory. The scribe turns to you again and hands over a baked tablet. This, she says, records your visit. Date, weight, seal code. It'll go in the archive. You ask how long it'll last. She smiles. Longer than we will. Later that afternoon, you wander back through the depot one last time. You pass workers patching cracks in storage jars with bitumen. You watch a donkey knock over a basket of lentils and promptly get scolded like a naughty child. You hear one scribe reciting a grain hymn under his breath, half prayer, half mnemonic. The hymn ends with a line: "May the storerooms be full and the mice afraid." Poetic. That evening, you return to the village empty-handed but full of stories. You sit with Dita's family again, share a meal of barley stew and dried figs, and describe the ledgers, the seals, the oddball onion complaint. The boy next to you says, "Maybe one day they'll have a seal." You ask what it would look like. "A goat with a crown," he says proudly. You nod. That's a strong brand. And as the stars rise again and the marshes hum, you realize something simple and timeless. Empires might be built on conquest, but they survive on supply chains. Not swords, but sacks of barley. Not heroes, but scribes. Not myths, but math. And somewhere, in a dusty storeroom under a sun-baked city, a little tablet now holds your name. You wake up to the steady tapping of a bird against the clay roof. Peck. Pause. Peck, peck. It's rhythmic, almost meditative. But eventually, the spell breaks when a goat strolls by and sneezes directly into your face. Welcome to Mesopotamia. You wipe your eyes, blink up at the brightening sky, and stretch your arms. There's a tightness in your back, and your feet still feel bruised from the granary trip. But there's no time to moan about it. Today is court day. That's right. You're not just wandering through temples or dodging fish guts in the marshes anymore. Today, you get to experience one of the least glamorous but most revealing parts of ancient civilization: Mesopotamian justice. Naram is waiting for you at the village path, eating a fig and not offering to share. "Don't talk much," he says with a smirk. "Let the scribes do that." You follow him toward the city center, where the noise thickens as you go donkeys braying, hawkers calling out the prices of dried onions and bitter beer, and children chasing each other around water jars. But today, everyone seems a little more polished. Tunics are neater. Hair is slicked back. There's a sense of ceremony in the air. You're heading to the open-air Corton Annex beside the temple complex. It's not grand. There are no columns, no marble statues, just a flat courtyard shaded by woven mats and watched over by two guards leaning lazily on staffs. One of them yawns as you walk by. Justice moves at its own pace here. You find a spot near the back as the morning docket begins. The first case involves a dispute between two farmers. One accuses the other of moving a boundary stone. The accused denies it, of course. A third neighbor is brought in as a witness, but he mostly talks about how good the pomegranates were this year. Eventually, a scribe reads out a land grant tablet from 12 years ago. The judge, an older man with a cracked voice and impressive beard, studies it, then rules that the boundary stays where it was and that both parties need to stop moving each other's goats in retaliation. You'd laugh, but no one else does. Apparently, goat relocation is a serious offense. The court continues, case after case. You hear accusations of stolen sandals, claims of unpaid dowries, arguments over broken irrigation gates. Each time, a scribe steps forward, holding a clay tablet like it's a sacred object. They read out measurements, testimonies, prior verdicts. The judge nods, listens, rubs his temple, and rules. You're surprised how much of this isn't about punishment, but about keeping peace, avoiding escalation, clarifying confusion, and also, yes, occasionally scolding someone for calling their neighbor a thieving lizard man. Around midday, the heat creeps in. A boy brings out a jar of barley drink and sets it on a stone bench. People take turns sipping from the same clay cup. The judge takes off his sash for a moment, wipes his forehead, then signals the next case. This one gets more attention. A woman named Ari accuses a local merchant of selling her spoiled sesame oil. He claims she stored it improperly. She claims it was rancid from the start. The scribe reads out the original sale contract, which includes the phrase, "Merchant shall not be held responsible after seventh sunrise." But Ari insists she reported the smell by the sixth sunrise. The judge pauses. He looks at the merchant, then at the scribe, then at the jug of oil, which Ari has brought, tightly sealed. A priest is called to interpret the scent. He opens the jug, sniffs, recoils slightly, then solemnly declares, "It smells like shame." That's enough. The judge rules in favor of Ari. The merchant is fined a portion of his grain allotment, and the crowd murmurs with satisfaction. Justice, in this moment, smells pretty good. During a break, you chat with one of the scribes, a woman named Kuri, with an inky thumb and a wicked sense of humor. Most of what we do, she tells you, is stop people from making the same fight twice. You ask how many tablets she writes in a week. Too many. But none of them are wasted. Clay remembers. You glance around. There are hundreds of tablets. Here's some sun-drying in trays. Others already filed in shelves inside the court annex. Each one a snapshot of a fight, a misunderstanding, a contract, a promise. Little bricks of memory. Later, a young man is brought forward, accused of stealing temple bread. He looks scared, but defiant. "They were going to throw it away," he shouts. "It was old." The judge raises an eyebrow. "Did you take it?" "I did." The judge sighs, then turns to the priest. "Was the bread consecrated?" The priest shakes his head. "No, just dry." The verdict? The young man has to sweep the temple steps for a week, and he's given fresh bread to take home. The crowd seems satisfied. You are too. By afternoon, the cases get more complex. There's a land dispute involving flood damage, two families arguing over whose canal wall gave way first. A man claims his neighbor's fig tree is stealing light from his own fig tree. A woman tries to annul a marriage arranged by her uncle, who may or may not have been drunk at the time. The court pauses to consult not just the law tablets, but also an omen reader who says the stars favor peaceful settlement today. So they settle. And the scribes keep writing. Each case ends the same way. The judge states his verdict. The scribe reads it back. The clay is marked with the case number and sealed with both parties' stamps. A priest blesses the tablet with a whisper of incense. It is then placed on a shelf with dozens, hundreds of others. All of this, you realize, happens without parchment, without paper, without pens, just clay, reed, and memory. And yet it works. As the sun starts to dip and the guards begin shooing people from the courtyard, you sit for a moment under the awning, staring at the rows of tablets. Each one is a voice from the past, preserved in baked mud, waiting to be discovered. A story that someone thought was worth writing down. It's not the glory of conquest or the majesty of gods. It's a sandal stolen, a boundary disputed, an old loaf of bread reclaimed. And that, strangely, is what makes it feel real. Mesopotamia isn't just a civilization of monuments and myths. It's a place where people bickered, bargained, and believed in fairness. A world where someone kept track of it all. Where law wasn't some abstract force in a gilded hall. It was a man with a stylus and a bit of wet clay. doing his best to help people get along. You rise the next morning to the clinking of pottery and the low hum of voices already deep in argument. It's barely light outside, but the city doesn't wait for the sun. You step out into a warm breeze, passing women fetching water and men unloading bundles of reeds. Somewhere, a child is being scolded for trying to smuggle a frog into the kitchen. Again. Today, you'll be spending your time in a place you haven't truly explored, yet the workshop district. And not just to observe. You're here to work, or at least to try. Naram gives you a grin that says, this'll be fun for him, and probably not for you. He leads you through narrow alleys lined with open courtyards, where artisans hammer, shape, carve, twist, fire, grind, and shout. Dust floats through sunbeams like powder. The air smells of clay, wood smoke, oil, and just a hint of something burnt. You hope it's not intentional. Your first stop is the potter's yard. Rows of vessels sit drying in the sun, some tall and narrow, others squat and wide. The master potter waves at you with a hand already caked in gray clay and motions for you to sit at a turntable. She demonstrates a quick press of her foot on the kick wheel, then like magic her hands coax a formless lump into something elegant and round. Your turn. You press your foot. The wheel wobbles. You place your hands on the clay, and it promptly flies off and hits a goat. Everyone laughs, including the goat. Pottery, it turns out, is a lot harder than it looks. After a few attempts, you manage a bowl that's lopsided and deeply unsettling to look at, but technically functional. The potter gives you a generous nod. Could be worse. At least it's not cursed. You wipe your hands and head next door to the metalworker's forge. This place hums with heat. The walls radiate warmth, and your skin prickles as soon as you step in. Bronze tools lie on benches, glowing faintly, and the air smells like molten stone and sweat. A teenage apprentice shows you how to pour liquid metal into a moldicing tongs, gloves, and very clear instructions not to touch anything. You follow carefully, managing to create what looks like a small bronze nail. The apprentice holds it up, shrugs, and says, "It could poke something." High praise. You learn that Mesopotamian metalworkers had to import almost everything. Copper came from Oman, tin from the east, gold from who knows where. That meant this forge wasn't just a place of creation, it was the final step in a long trade network stretching across mountains and deserts. Historians still argue whether the average Mesopotamian knew how far their tools traveled before arriving here, but judging by how expensive they were, someone was definitely aware. From the forge, you follow Naram to the weaver's compound. Here, dozens of women sit under shaded canopies, fingers flying through threads with dizzying speed. Looms creak, cloth stretches, and shuttles click back and forth like a musical rhythm. You sit down awkwardly, and one of the weavers smiles and hands you a bundle of dyed wool. She shows you how to start a simple weave. Under, over, under, over. Sounds easy. You immediately mess up the pattern. She gently pulls the thread out, pats your hand, and starts again. You try again, a little slower this time. Under, over, focus, breathe. Eventually, you create a tiny square of fabric that is slightly tighter on one end and fuzzy on the other. Still, it's cloth. Cloth in Mesopotamia wasn't just practical. It was currency. Literally. Barley and cloth were both used as forms of standardized payment. The state often paid workers in rations of grain and bolts of linen, depending on their role. That meant these women weren't just artisans. They were, in a way, minting money. By midday, You're sweaty, sore, and starting to admire how tireless everyone is. No one slows down, no one complains. Work here is a shared rhythm, a cultural heartbeat. Lunch is simple: lentil mash, flatbread, and date paste wrapped in fig leaves. Everyone eats with their hands, sitting together on low stools or clay bricks. One of the blacksmiths tells a joke about a donkey that got drunk on fermented barley, and the whole table erupts in laughter. You laugh too, though you're not entirely sure you got the punchline. After the break, you're sent to the tablet workshop. This might be your favorite. Here, scribes and apprentices craft the clay tablets used in everything from contracts to poetry. Wet clay is rolled out, shaped, and trimmed to precise dimensions. You're given a stylus, flattened reed carved into a wedge, and a small square of clay. Write your name, a scribe says. You hesitate. Just make something up. You try a few wedge shapes: a vertical mark, a sideways one. It doesn't say anything coherent, but it feels like writing. The scribe grins. You're a natural bureaucrat. The room has a quiet dignity to it. Even with the soft clatter of styluses and the murmur of copied texts, there's a kind of reverence here. These aren't just workers, they're record keepers, storytellers, tax collectors, and poets. You're shown one particularly old tableta hymn to Inanna, etched in elegant cuneiform. It's been copied dozens of times, the scribe tells you, by generations of students. Even when they didn't understand the words anymore, she adds, they still copied them. There's a strange comfort in that. By the time the sun begins to dip and the city glows with its golden, end-of-day hue, you've tried your hand at half a dozen crafts and failed gloriously at all of them. But you've also learned something. Civilization doesn't rest on temples and kings. It rests on people. People who shape bowls and pour metal, who weave linen and press wedges into clay, who laugh at goat jokes and pass their craft to the next pair of hands. As you walk back home through the alleys, past flickering oil lamps and doorways filled with music and supper smells, you carry nothing in your hands. But your head is full, your heart too, and your terrible crooked bowl, you left it behind. But someone's already planted a flower in it. Sleep doesn't come easily tonight. Your feet are sore. Your arms ache. Your brain still feels like it's spinning from the smell of that sesame oil at court. But mostly, it's the city itself. It doesn't sleep the way a village does. Even now, deep in the night, you can hear distant drums, soft flute melodies from a rooftop, the gentle slosh of water being hauled up a staircase. Somewhere nearby, someone laughs, then immediately shushes themselves, as if remembering the gods might be listening. You lie on your back, eyes tracing the dim patterns on the ceiling, and you think, what haven't you seen yet? There's one thing: religion. Not just the surface rituals, or the quick blessings scribes offer before stamping a tablet. No, you want to understand what drives this world, what binds it, what gives it its shape beneath the mud bricks and barley. So before dawn, you set out toward the highest point in the city, the ziggurat. It rises above the rooftops like a man-made mountain, terraced and angular, glowing faintly in the early light. You've seen it from a distance, sure, but up close, it's a different beast entirely. The base is broad and solid, its steps worn from centuries of feet. Above that, the tiers narrow, painted in faded bands of red and blue, with vines creeping between the bricks like the earth trying to reclaim its share. At the foot of the ziggurat is the temple complex. You pass through a courtyard of offering altars where incense still smolders and oil has pooled in shallow channels. A priest is sweeping ash into a clay pan. She doesn't look up. Inside the temple, it's cool and dim. Candles flicker. A low chant hums through the air too, low to make out the words, but strong enough that you feel them in your chest. A man in ceremonial robes approaches you. He wears a long beard and carries a staff tipped with a crescent symbol of Nana, the moon god. "Are you seeking?" he asks softly. You say yes, though you're not entirely sure what. He nods and leads you through a side corridor deeper into the temple. Here, the walls are covered with carvings myths, rituals, lists of offerings. You pause before one panel showing a god descending from the heavens on a lion-shaped cloud. Below, humans bow and present baskets of bread, jugs of beer, and a goat that looks very, very nervous. Your guide explains, the gods aren't far away. They walk among us. They hunger. They bless. And they punish. You ask if people really believe the gods live in the temple. He shrugs. Some do. Some just hope they do. Either way, we leave food. Historians still argue whether the offerings made to the gods were ever eaten by priests, left to rot, or simply symbolized submission. What's clear is that these rituals were deeply embedded in everyday life. Birth, Inanna is thanked. Illness, Gula is invoked. A new canal built, Enki gets a little shrine on the side. Everything, from war to weather to weeds, has a divine connection. And the temple? It's more than a house of worship. It's a bank, a bakery, a storehouse, a legal archive, a place where scribes train, where children learn to read hymns, where farmers bring their tithe in barley, and priests distribute it as rations to laborers. Some of the very tablets you saw in court yesterday, they're stored here, alongside poems, chants, spells to ward off scorpion stings and bad dreams. Your guide leads you to the inner sanctum. The air is thick with incense no resinous, sweet, nearly choking. At the center of the chamber stands a statue, waist high, made of gleaming black stone. It depicts a seated deity Nana, god of the moon, holder of wisdom, counter of time. Offerings are placed before him. Cakes, dates, flowers, small jugs of oil. A low-ranking priest bows and murmurs a prayer, then carefully sweeps away yesterday's offerings. You're told only the high priest may speak to the god directly. You whisper, and does the god ever answer? The guide says nothing. You step outside later, blinking in the sudden light. The sun has risen fully now, bathing the ziggurat in gold. People are already climbing the stairs. Pilgrims, temple staff, visitors. One carries a pigeon in a cage. Another, a loaf of bread, still warm from the oven. On the lower steps, a young girl is pressing a small clay plaque into the wall and offering tablet. She's drawn a stick figure with huge eyes and a star over its head. Beside it, she's etched a name. You ask what she's praying for. Rain, she says. The gods of Mesopotamia weren't just distant cosmic forces. They were personal. They had families, rivalries, favorite foods. They got angry, jealous, hungry, sad. And in turn, people built their lives around appeasing them, keeping them fed, flattered, feared. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes not so much. One old woman sitting near the altar tells you a story. When she was a child, a lightning strike hit the city walls. The priest said it was punishment for forgetting a festival. So the next year, they held it twice. Did it work? You ask. No lightning, she says. but my uncle got trampled by a bull. So maybe? By midday, the temple complex is bustling. You see musicians playing harps and lyres in the side courtyards. Children dance. Scribes chant hymns. A priest teaches a group of young boys how to burn a proper amount of incense. Spoiler, it's a lot. You sit for a while on a stone bench, watching it all. And you realize this is the real heart of the city. Not the markets, not the palaces, not even the courts. This, the place where belief becomes ritual, where memory becomes myth, where humans reach toward the heavens with bread in one hand and a prayer in the other. You close your eyes and inhale the mingled scent of oil, dust, and flowers. The drums begin again in the distance, soft and steady. And you wonder if the gods really do walk among us. What would they think of the little girl and her rain tablet? Probably the same thing you think, that it was beautiful. By now, you've wandered through temples, squinted at tablets, learned how not to make a pot, and embarrassed yourself in front of a weaving circle. You've watched laws unfold like plays and left your crooked bowl in someone's garden. And still, somehow, there's more. Today, you're leaving the city. Not forever, just a long, dusty days walk out toward the fringes. Out where the walls give way to fields and the hum of city life fades into a softer rhythm of birdsong, creaking trees, and the slow breath of the land. The moment you step beyond the gate, everything changes. The road isn't paved. It's dirt packed firm by sandals and donkey hooves. The walls are gone, replaced by low dikes holding back shallow canals. The sounds are different too. No more hawkers or court scribes. Just the buzz of insects, the caw of distant birds, and the slosh of irrigation. You're walking toward the fields, and already your sandals are wet. You pass rows of barley, waving gently like water in the wind. The air smells sharp and fresh, like mud and sunlight. Farmers move slowly through the rows, bent at the waist, examining shoots. One lifts his head as you approach. His face is weathered, but kind. Too early for the sun, he grunts. But the barley likes it. He gestures toward a series of gates and trenches carved into the soil, an intricate web of canals, pulling water from the river and threading it through the farmland like veins. A young boy jogs barefoot between the dikes, using a wooden tool to adjust the flow from one channel to the next. He whistles while he works. You stop and watch for a bit. The system is genius, really. Just water, gravity, and teamwork. It's the kind of quiet brilliance that historians write entire books about. Whether it's 5,000 years ago or today, someone, somewhere, is fighting mud to feed people. They invite you to help. You hesitate, but only for a moment. The water's cold. The mud sucks at your ankles. And your first attempt at building a canal wall crumbles like a sad cake. But you try again, and again, until it holds. One of the workers slaps you on the back and grins. Now you're one of us. You sit with them beneath a tamarisk tree for a midday break. The shade is patchy, but the breeze is kind. They pass around flatbread stuffed with mashed lentils and a jug of date syrup so sweet it makes your teeth ache. There's no need for words, just hands passing food, eyes half closed against the light, and flies buzzing lazily over discarded fig skins. After lunch, they point you east, toward the marshes. You follow the path as it thins, winding past a low orchard where goats nap in the shade. Then slowly, the land begins to dissolve. First, puddles, then reeds, then water. Shimmering, still water, reflecting a sky so wide it swallows everything. You're in the wetlands now, and the road becomes a boat. It's made of tightly packed reeds, sealed with thick black bitumen. It rocks gently under your feet as a boy barefoot, grinning, missing one front tooth paddles you deeper into the green. The marsh is alive. Birds with impossible legs skitter across lily pads. Dragonflies the size of playing cards buzz past your nose. Every so often, a fish leaps and lands with a splash that echoes across the reeds. The boy hums a tune, simple and repetitive, like a lullaby. You don't know the words, but you hum along anyway. Eventually, the water narrows again, and a village appears. Not quite land, not quite water. Just a scatter of huts balanced on stilts, connected by planks and rope bridges. Smoke drifts from chimneys. Nets hang drying between poles. Children leap from platforms into the river, laughing as they disappear below the surface. You step onto the main walkway and immediately sink ankle-deep into marshy mud. A woman hauling a basket of fish chuckles and tosses you a long stick. You'll need this. The ground here doesn't always behave. She introduces herself as Luma, and she tells you everything, as she walk, show they catch fish, how they braid reeds into baskets, how to scare off herons from stealing the day's catch. Her hands never stop moving. She guides you past a row of open baskets filled with drying river mussels, then hands you a pair of tongs and points to a bubbling pot. Your turn. You try. The mussels are hot and slippery. You drop 3 before you finally get one into the pot. Well, Luma says, smiling, you're better than my nephew. He boiled his sandal once. The people here live simply, but not poorly. Their huts are tidy. Their tools are sharp. Their lives are full. Children play with carved boats. Grandparents tell stories under the stars. Meals are shared without fuss or formality. You ask if they miss the city. Luma shrugs. They need the city. We don't. Still, the state finds them. On one hut wall, you see a hardened clay tablet nailed in place an official tax record. It lists how many fish must be sent upstream, how many bundles of reeds, how much salt. A reminder that even here, at the edge of everything, someone is counting. Historians still debate whether these communities were self-governing or loosely managed by temple bureaucrats. But one thing's certain, the marsh doesn't care. It just keeps growing. That night, you sleep in one of the huts, curled under a reed mat, listening to the marsh breathe. Frogs sing. Crickets chirp. The wind whispers through the thatch. And in that in-between world, half water, half land, you dream of rivers that never end. Your legs are beginning to understand time in a new way. They don't measure it in minutes or hours anymore, but in bricks walked, stairs climbed, and the slow burn of muscles that haven't stopped aching since day 2. But today isn't about climbing or hauling. It's about something quieter. Today, you're diving into memory. Not your own, but the city's. And not just the memories scratched onto tablets or spoken in stories, but the ones buried in layers of dust, silt, and sun-baked silence. You begin in the northeast quarter of the city, past a row of half-collapsed granaries and a courtyard overrun by vines. Here, a modest shelter made of mud brick and reeds houses something extraordinary: the archives. Not the formal ones, with shelves of legal contracts and tax records. These are more like forgotten shelves in an attic, things dug up, left behind, or quietly preserved by generations who knew better than to throw away old stories. The archivist greets you with a nod and a smudge of dust across his cheek. His hair is gray, his robe is plain, and his hands are stained from decades of handling clay that predates his grandparents' grandparents. No talking for a while, he says gently, just watching. So you follow him. He kneels beside a wooden crate filled with broken fragments, bits of fired clay, edges of tablets, shards of decorated bowls, and one curious figurine missing its head. He picks up each piece, turns it slowly in his palm, then places it down on a cloth. Not sorted by type, but by feeling. You learn to hear them, he murmurs. Even when they're quiet. You try. You pick up a triangular fragment, just one corner of what was probably a receipt, judging by the numbers and weights carved into it. It's nothing glamorous, just a record of lentils delivered in the 5th month. But somehow, it matters. You imagine the scribe who wrote it, hunched in a corner somewhere, annoyed that someone showed up late or brought less than promised. Maybe they didn't even have good lentils. Maybe they were shriveled and slightly moldy. You chuckle. The archivist raises an eyebrow. That one funny to you? You nod. Lentil drama. He snorts and hands you a tablet with a clearer inscription. This one's more poetic. Literally. It's an ancient hymn to Inanna, goddess of love, war, and maybe the most intimidating eyeliner in all of history. The words are strange, beautiful, and vaguely threatening. Lots of blood and roses. You read it out loud, softly, the syllables crumbling in your mouth like dry earth. The archivist lights a small oil lamp and points toward a clay shelf. This is where we keep the ghosts. You laugh nervously. Hez probably joking. Probably. There, in long rows, are seals. Hundreds of them. Some so small, you can't believe anyone could carve on them. Your hands aren't steady. You barely know how to draw a stick figure in the sand, but you press your thumb into the clay. Then a mark, then another. Not words, just lines, curves, a shape that probably doesn't mean anything but it's yours. He nods, takes it gently, places it on a shelf next to hundreds of others. You're part of it now, he says. You walk back through the streets as the sun begins to set, casting long golden shadows. Vendors are packing up. Children chase each other with reed hoops. Somewhere, someone's playing a stringed instrument that sounds vaguely like a cat in love. And you think, this whole place is a layered memory. Not just walls or temples or laws, but people. People who dropped bowls, who scribbled bad poetry, who tried to make their mark on clay, on others, on time. And as you look around, you see it. Modern life, flowing over ancient bones. A woman sweeping her doorstep, unaware that the brick beneath her foot once formed the base of a palace. A man building a new oven using fragments of a statue. A boy scratching a crude, smiley face onto a centuries-old stone wall. Okay, maybe don't do that. You smile, because Mesopotamia isn't just a place. It's a rhythm, a heartbeat under the dust, a whisper beneath the shouting. And you were lucky enough to listen. The night before you leave, the air feels heavier somehow, like the sky itself is leaning in to say goodbye. You've seen the temples, walked the fields, heard the laughter of fishermen, and the quiet scribbles of scribes. You've burned your feet, bruised your pride, maybe even rethought your entire relationship with lentils. And now, as the stars rise over the rooftops of this ancient city, you feel it. The weight of time pressing gently on your shoulders like a warm hand. You spend your final evening in a quiet courtyard near the edge of town, sitting cross-legged on a flat rooftop alongside a few of the people you've met along the way. A boy from the marsh village plays a flute made from river reeds. One of the priestesses hums along, her voice low and steady, like the sound of water beneath stone. Someone brings out a plate of dates and figs. Someone else pours beer into mismatched clay cups. You sip slowly, eyes drifting up toward the stars that once guided caravans across burning deserts and told farmers when to plant. There's a moment brief, but sharp, when you feel like you don't belong here, like all this beauty and strangeness belongs to them, not you. That maybe you've been a guest too long in a world that isn't yours. But then the old man next to you, the one who taught you how to spot a clean brick from a cracked one, leans over and mutters, "Don't worry. We're all just visiting." And somehow, that makes everything okay. As the night deepens, a light breeze picks up, rustling through the tamarisk trees, sending the faint scent of salt and clay into the air. Oil lamps flicker across the rooftops. A baby cries in the distance, then stops. Somewhere, a dog barks once and then thinks better of it. You lie back on the roof, arms folded behind your head, and stare at the stars. The constellations look the same, though the names are different. That one over there, the bent one with the crooked leg, might have been a lion to the Mesopotamians, or a god, or someone's weird uncle who wouldn't stop showing up in myths. Historians still debate the exact meanings of those star maps carved into stone. Some say they predicted floods. Others say they were calendars. Others believe they were mostly spiritual in effort to find order in a sky that was too vast to ignore. All you know is that they're beautiful and comforting. You think about how many people must be stared at this same sky. Thousands of years of eyes turned upward. Farmers, kings, sailors, mothers, dreamers, all looking for patterns, meaning, stories. And now you. The flute music fades. The rooftop clears. Eventually, you're alone. You sit up slowly, stretch your aching back, and take one last look at the city below. The ziggurat towers in the distance, half shadow, half moonlight. The streets curl like vines around homes and courtyards. Somewhere out there, someone is just starting their night shift. Somewhere else, someone is closing their eyes, just like you. You take a deep breath, the kind that pulls the whole city into your chest. Dust, smoke, river air, stories. Then you rise, and with quiet steps, you descend the stairs. You don't look back. And now, as you ease back into your bed, wrapped in blankets instead of linen robes, with the hum of a fan instead of the whisper of reeds, you let all the pieces of Mesopotamia settle in your mind like silt at the bottom of a river. You've wandered through temples and markets, sat with scribes and farmers, drifted through marshes, and pressed your name into clay. You felt the hum of a world that lived and breathed 5,000 years ago, and somehow still breathes through every word written down, every story passed on, every broken pot uncovered by curious hands. Maybe you remember the boy who paddled you through reeds, or the old woman who cooked fish under a thatched roof. Maybe you remember the soft sound of a tablet being carved, or the way a goat glared at you like it knew your credit score. But mostly, maybe you just feel full of quiet wonder, full of time, because Mesopotamia isn't just history, it's humanity. It's what happens when people gather, write things down, share food, tell jokes, and keep trying no matter how many floods, kings, taxes, or goat-related mishaps come their way. So rest easy, friend. You've traveled far, across centuries, in sand and stories. And now, it's time to close your eyes. Let the stars above ancient Ur lull you to sleep. Let the soft splash of oars in a canal carry you inward. Let the scent of clay and date palms drift you gently out of thought. You're home now in the cradle of civilization. And in this quiet moment, there's nothing more to do. Just breathe and sleep. End of story. Sweet dreams.